I'm often caught saying there's a sake for everyone because there's lower alcohol sakes, there's the regular sakes which are around 15 to 17% ABV, there's unpasteurized sake, there's roughly filtered cloudy sake, there's sparkling sake that's done in low alcohol style and also made like champagne, so a secondary fermentation in bottle. There's the fruit infused sakes that you're mentioning. But then there's all the grades and styles on top of it, so you can get rich umami-filled savory sakes. You can also get dry, elegant, wine-like aromatic sakes. But there's also a range called koshu, which is aged sakes, and those are all over the place. They can be very sherry-like, and they can show a lot of really savory umami characters that are just really intense and really interesting. Wine and beer don't have a lot of glutamic acids, and glutamic acids are linked with umami. And so, just like bitterness, and you add bitterness to a bitter dish, the bitterness grows and sometimes out of balance. Well, in umami and glutamic acids, when you add umami to something that has umami, actually it creates a synergy effect. And so sake is incredibly food friendly because of that aspect. I liken it to an Italian tomato sauce and where you add Parmigiana on top. Umami and umami, it's actually really, really delicious. It's the same thing that you're doing with sake. And so for that matter, yes, Japanese food is great with sake because of the soy and miso and kombu, dashi broth. Those are all umami things. So sake just naturally marries with that. But it also does well against things like wasabi and ginger, which really are challenging for wines. But any kind of cuisine will go well with sake. It's not just for Japanese food. It's built to be this very versatile offering. In Japan, we often think of Japanese food as sushi, but there's all kinds of other things like tempura and wagyu beef and so on that really are still Japanese food and go well with sake. One of my favorite pairings is actually taking a savory style sake like a Kimoto Junmai. Kimoto is a method of sake making that goes back to the Edo period. It just takes a little bit longer to get the fermentation going, and in doing so you create these really savory, rich aromas. Having that with braised pork belly is just like one of those matches that, even though it's 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm salivating right now. I kind of want to go and try that. I just recently judged in Yamagata, and actually the winner of the Koshu category, to give you an idea, was a 44-year-old Nihonshu from Yamagata, and it was chocolate brown and had coffee and chocolate notes. It had dried fruit notes, and it was so interesting but so rare. It'd be a hard find to find in Canada at this point, just because it's a kind of a small market. The other side is the versatility. Sake, you can take a sake and serve it at chilled temperatures or closer to room temperature, or then you can warm it up at different temperatures, and you're going to get a slightly different angle on that sake. I often use the analogy of a 21-band equalizer that you'd find on a stereo. And when you warm up sake, you actually you amp up the sweetness, you amp up the umami, you amp up the acidity. And so you can really change the profile of the sake. And when you're doing pairings, for instance, you can have a lot of fun in matching a sake that maybe is a bit too delicate for this dish, but just adjusting the temperature, you can actually just find that right fit with the dish. Generally, the sakes that are great warmed up are sakes that have a nice acidity, nice umami, and those tend to be styles where the brewers are leaving more of the rice on. So something like the grades called Junmai or Yamahai Junmai, Kimoto Junmai. These are styles that are kind of a bit earthier, more of the rice characters coming out, more of the cereal, the grains, and you can get even some really savory mushroom and beef broth and soy components, and even dried fruit and then some fresh fruit mixed in there. So really cool stuff. Those are great warm, and again, you can amp up some of those flavors and really do some really amazing pairings. If you see the word ginjo in the bottle, it means that they've polished a lot of the rice away, the outside fat and protein, and what happens is, because they're using special yeast and lower temperature fermentation, you get these really delicate bouquet of aromas that by warming, you're going to actually kind of lose some of that. And I find in the fall when the weather changes, I tend to start getting into the more savory sakes where I can play with temperature as well. One of my favorite things to do to this day, and I'm still not tired of it after 10 years of being in the sake world, is taking a sake and trying it at a variety of different temperatures and just seeing how different it is. Because just 3 or 4 different degrees at Celsius on a sake really changes it. And you could have a chilled sake and a warm sake of the same sake, and I could fool almost anyone, including myself, into thinking that they're 2 different sakes, because it just changes. So in a way, sake has this chameleon-like effect that I really love playing with. And the dinner we had here at Key with Dewa Zakura, it was a great example. I bring out the sakes and I'm thinking about what temperature they're going to be at by the time the dish hits to the table, how much of the temperature is going to be absorbed in the glasses that you're using, what kind of glass should I use. That is also going to change the perception of sake. My first sake dinners, I had a laser thermometer, and I was actually just trying to get it down to the last second, but I think that's how I lost my hair, because I was just too stressed out trying to get it to the pinpoint temperature. But having a ballpoint and just thinking about that is still really fascinating to me. Kind of like wine, you can use as good of a wine as you want to put in your cooking. Sake, I often cook with junmai. The junmai category, usually you're polishing the rice to about 70% of its original size. So you're leaving a bit more on than the ginjo styles. And in doing so, you got, again, that umami factor. And so in cooking with that, you're going to get a bit more of the sake flavor, but also a bit of that umami, that deliciousness. You're going to get that backbone for a dish. One of my favorite dishes to do is braised chicken in sake and something called mirin. Mirin is a low alcohol or no alcohol rice-based or fermented rice, kind of like a sake with no alcohol, and it's really sweet. So having a little bit of that in there as well with some soy sauce and ginger and other ingredients really goes well in simmering something. Some Japanese brewers that have said it best, sake's done its job when the only time you notice it on the table is when you run out of it. And I think that it's true. Sake doesn't really want to be the hi, this is me all the time. I mean, some sakes are like that, but quite often it's just when it's doing its magic, it's when it's just in the background and kind of like a table leg, just holding up the meal without wanting to take any accolades for it. And that's one of the things I love about it.